From the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. It was those words over 25 years ago that forewarned cinemagoers that the brand new movie from director John Landis wasn't going to be another comedy romp, but rather the revisiting of a classic Hollywood horror monster. When An American Werewolf came out over the summer of 1981, it opened to a varying assortment of reactions from both the critics and movie-going public alike. But while the question as to whether or not the film was supposed to be scary or funny was the focus of much confusion, what was absolutely certain was that John Landis had delivered a visually visceral and unforgiving horror spectacle featuring some special effects makeup, the likes of which had never been seen before.
Can you see anything? No. Sounds far away. Not far enough. Come on. Jack. What? Where are we going? I don't know. I'll tell you when we get there. Okay, because... Oh! You really scared me, you shithead.
There's no way that one can ever really tell with any film what's going to happen to it. And American Werewolf, I thought was, it's a really good story, and but I never imagined that it would have the kind of cult following and then become the classic it's become.
Run!
I thought this was going to be a success, very, very definitely, because your first impressions of something often turn out to be right. And my first impressions on just reading the script were that I can't wait to see this picture.
It was so acclaimed when it was first released, and everybody talked about it and raved about it even. Made me feel quite proud that I worked on it.
There were definitely a number of times where I was really questioning what we were making and whether it was worth all the work that we put into it. God, this is not really like a horror film, and that's what makes it great. I mean, John really knew what he was doing.
It's extraordinary the life it's had, and that it still goes on, drawing attention to itself. Something I would never have expected.
That's the feedback I get from people. It still holds up after 25 years, and it does, because it looks real. It looked real then, and it still does.
It's pleasing and flattering and terrific that people like it. It's got a lot to answer for, because it was fairly radical at the time, and now it influenced many other filmmakers, not necessarily in a good way.
The story of An American Werewolf in London tells of two American backpackers who are attacked on the northern English moors by a werewolf. Whereas one is ripped to pieces and killed instantly, the survivor doesn't fare up any better after he's told that he's going to turn into the accursed lycanthrope at the next full moon. For horror fans the world over, the film was a gore-filled reimagining of classic werewolf tales of years gone. For me as a 3-year-old trying to work out how to use a video recorder, it was the perfect introduction to the horror genre. But for director John Landis, who at the time was in high demand as a comedy director, it became a labour of love that would take him over 11 years to get to the big screen.
When I was 18, I went to Yugoslavia, behind the Iron Curtain, to work on a MGM movie called Kelly's Heroes. I was a gopher, schlepper, And while there, I witnessed this funeral that was very strange. And basically, I was with a guy named Sasha, who was a Yugoslav assistant director. So Sasha is taking me on this long drive, I think from Novi Sad to Umag. And we came to people standing around in the crossroads. It was gypsies, and they were burying this guy feet first. He was wrapped in like a canvas cloth. They wrapped him in rosaries and garlic. It was all very exotic. And I said, what is going on? And Sasha spoke to them, and he thought it was very funny. He got the giggles. He really thought it was funny. And when he sobered up enough to explain, because I'm going, what's so funny? This guy, the body, had committed a crime, and I've forgotten what it was, but it was an egregious crime, rape or murder or something. And they were burying him this way in this very elaborate ceremony in the crux of a crossroad, which I thought was wild, so that his body would not get up, basically, and cause trouble, so that the corpse would remain in the ground.
For 1,000 years, we gypsies have buried our dead like that.
I said, really? And Sasha says, oh, they're gypsies, peasants. But I thought about it because it was very profound. I mean, first of all, the gypsies really did look like dress extras on the Universal back lot, dressed like Maria Ouspenskaya. This is 1969. I mean, we put a man on the moon in 1969, and these people are worried about a zombie, So I was very taken with the idea, and I thought, well, that's a good idea for a movie, is how would Sasha and I react if he did claw his way to the surface and, pull himself out of the grave like Peter Cushing? And what do you do? What do you do in that situation? Because if you're a rational and fairly sophisticated, educated person, it's bullshit, it doesn't exist. So how do you deal with something that doesn't exist when it's standing in front of you?
Ah! You're not real. Oh, don't be a putz, David. Come here.
I was thinking about, okay, what monster? Vampires, zombies, werewolves. I was thinking ghosts. I was trying to, because I wanted to do a monster movie, and I hit upon werewolves. I did all this research and stuff. Basically, the most number of real werewolves, the people who were executed for being werewolves, are in France and in Wales. So I thought, well, I don't speak French. And at that time, England had what was called the British quota system, or the Eady plan, which was a tax incentive where the producer got a share of the box office in the UK. It was to encourage production in Great Britain, and it worked very well. But you had to qualify. You had to have a British content. Certain, everyone had to be a Brit up to a point, unless it was a movie star or the director or something. In any case, so I thought, oh, good. Well, London, where Gothic horror, Mary Shelley was British, where all this stuff is really, London's the place. So I thought it's a great city, and that would be a great place for it. So I wrote it. When I was 18, I wrote the first script. I was pretty happy with it. When I finally got people to read it, they all went, what the fuck? And I always got the same two comments. This is much too scary to be funny, and this is much too funny to be scary. Never one or the other. It was always, well, what is this? I said, it's a horror film, but it's funny. Yeah. Well, so it's a comedy. No.
Hi, fella. Hi, little dog.
When I made my first silly movie, Schlock, with Rick Baker, I discussed it with him.
John played the Schlockthropus, and during the time that I was making him up, John was telling me the whole story of American Werewolf. He had already written it. I was just, really excited by what he was saying. We both love the old Lon Chaney stuff, and especially the transformations in those kind of movies. And he just said, it didn't seem right to him that if you were going to change into a werewolf or some other creature, that you would just sit in the corner of a chair like Lon Chaney Jr. and be perfectly still, except that, each time you're in a slightly different position when you do the lab dissolves. He says, I want to do it in a way, I want to show the pain, I want him to be able to move around. He's going to pull his clothes off, and I want to see the whole body change. And So figure out how to do that. So I said, wow, okay, yeah, that would be cool. I don't quite know how to do it, but it'd be a really cool thing to do. The good news is that, Schlock was this $30,000 independent film that basically nobody saw. So people weren't banging down John's door to get him to do, because he was saying, well, this is going to be my next movie.
What can I tell you? I mean, no one would make it, and I really liked it. The Kentucky Fried Movie came about because David Zucker saw me on television promoting Schlock, and they said, that's a kid who made a movie. How did he do it? And I met them, and I said, well, do you have a script? And they were like, I said, you have to have a screenplay. You have to have written material to shoot. And they really didn't know what I was talking about. So I gave them the script of American Werewolf in London. That's what they copied, the form, So it was around for a long, because I wrote it in 1969. It wasn't until after Kentucky Fried, Animal House, and the Blues Brothers, those three all were very profitable, that I could make Werewolf.
After Animal House, he had a lot more power and control over the movies he made and what he could do and not do. And I had been the editor with him on all those early movies. He asked me if I'd like to produce American Werewolf in London with him, and I thought that would be great fun and a great opportunity for me to take on another role.
I said it was a $10 million negative pickup, take it or leave it, and they mostly left it.
The studios are always looking for reasons not to make movies, and the edgier and more different than the movie is from the cookie cutter that they see, either horror films or comedies or dramas, whatever, the less likely it is to get made. But after Blues Brothers, John Peters and Peter Goober at Polygram, were running Polygram, really liked the screenplay, really got that we could, combine the horror and the comedy elements. And to their credit, they gave us the money to go and make it.
And I had kind of given up on it. I figured it was never going to happen. And as the way things work out, I get a call one day from Joe Dante and Mike Fennell saying, we have this werewolf movie we're going to do, and would you be interested in doing it? And I said, yeah. And this was The Howling. I started out doing some designs and working on it and thought this would be my chance to use my transformation stuff I've thought up. And I didn't really want to tell John about it.
When I called him and said, hey, I got the money, let's go. And he went, I'm doing a werewolf movie. I was like, what?
You bastard. He's like yelling at me on the phone, because, well, you're not going to do transformation? Well, yeah, I kind of told him somewhat about how, you son of a bitch. He's like, yeah, screaming at me and stuff. And I go, what I'll do is I'll get out of it. I had this young guy that was my protege at the time, Rob Bottin, and I said, I can turn it over to Rob, and I'll just consult on it, and then I'll do Werewolf, So I think to this day, he still hasn't forgiven me for that, I don't blame him, actually.
I mean, I had great confidence that he could do it. I was probably misplaced, but I still had great confidence that he could do it. I remember he said, well, if we're going to do this, this is now later when I said I had the money, I want at least 6 months to mold, take molds of the two leads, Jack and David, and then so I can work on these prosthetics and things for at least 6 months before we begin principal photography. So that was kind of risky because I had to hire David Naughton and Griffin Dunn. I had to hire the two boys before I had the money.
Well, unlike the decor, I guess some things just don't change. Here we are in the Slaughtered Lamb pub, aka the Black Swan in Surrey. As you can see, the wall that once played host to the five-pointed star is no longer there, and there's no danger of anybody missing a dartboard that no longer exists. With a $10 million budget now in place and pre-production now well and truly underway, it was now the task of John Landis to select the perfect cast of performers that would bring his extraordinary screenplay to life.
Well, I had to have British crew. I had to have an entirely British crew. I was already kind of stretching it because they said that Griffin Dunn and David Naughton were not movie stars, which is true. They were not movie stars. And for some arbitrary reason, it was like okay to hire a movie star, but I don't know, just an American. So, but I was able to convince them, because in a cast of, I don't know, 60 speaking parts or something, 58 of them are English, you know. They wanted me to hire what's called North American actors, or usually Canadians. So it's like, beware the moon, eh?
John and I went through a whole number, probably 300 people, we both in New York and in Los Angeles, to find the guys to play the two boys. And it was not easy to get what we wanted.
So I had to find two boys who were kind of like my friend Greg and I when we were 15, 16. I was looking around, and the Dr. Pepper commercials were quite big then, where David would sing and dance.
He was familiar with the commercials. It would have been one thing to have to bring a cassette with me and say, I hope you get to see these. This is what's going on right now. But at the time that he met me, it was a very, popular campaign. How that qualified me to do the role that he had in mind is another story.
And I liked him on screen. I just thought, he's a likable guy. If he can do this, I can get a performance out of him. And I hired him.
I met John. He says, call me tomorrow. I called him the next day. He sang some little tune to me, and something to the effect that, wouldn't I like to be a werewolf too? And, I was just not really sure that he was, was he putting me on? And so he said, but now you need to get right over to meet Rick Baker. I mean, this all happened in a period of days as opposed to weeks. So you have to get right over and meet Rick and have these molds done. And I did. And the first thing Rick Baker said to me was, so you're playing? I said, I'm playing the role of David. He says, I feel sorry for you.
And Griffin, I met through casting. I saw 200 people.
I went in, I met John, and he was very friendly, and I think he did most of the talking. And he was just telling me all about this movie, and it's just going to be this thing. It's so exciting. It's all so great. And I don't think I'd ever been talked to by a director about, like, his vision for the movie. I mean, I was, a kid. But he seemed very excited about it, and it sounded really great, and I wasn't quite getting the whole picture. And I went home, no reading, no nothing. I think he asked me a few questions about myself, and I got home, and I had a crappy little apartment not far from here, and I got a phone call from my agent, who'd never gotten me a job before, saying that I should stand by, that a messenger was going to deliver the script. John wanted me to read it right away and then call him. And I did. I spoke to John, and he was like, well, you want to do it? And I thought I was going to audition over the phone. And he meant, do I want to do the movie? And no audition, no nothing. And I said, sure, like this happens to me all the time. And he goes, I got one question for you, though. Before we do anything, I got to ask you a question. And this is really important. You have to tell me the truth. Oh, God, okay. He goes, are you claustrophobic? And last question on earth I expected to be asked. I thought it would be something far more intimate. And I said no, which I would have said if I was terrified of closed spaces, but in this case it was true, and I said no, and he said, great, you got the part.
We were thrilled when Griffin came on board. We thought that with David Naughton, we were just couldn't have been better. They played off each other great.
Say knock knock. Knock knock. Who's there? Who?
Jenny I'd known for years. She lived in L.A. for quite a while and became very friendly with Deborah.
John and Deborah Landis were two of the first people I met when I went to Los Angeles. I instantly enjoyed the two of them and saw a lot of them. John Landis said he sent me the screenplay when he knew he had the money to go ahead, and that it had sort of been okayed for me to play the role. And I read the script and I thought that it was a really ambitious piece. Clearly the humour was there. There were some extremely well-written roles, which was lovely because as an actor you just looked to see what the roles are like, and that was great. But there was this kind of horror factor. I'm not very good really at horror movies and understanding how they work. But I knew if anyone could make it, John Landis could. I think if the script had been sent to me by somebody else, I might have thought twice about it.
Jenny Agutter and John Woodvine as the nurse and the doctor were just exceptionally good. And again, it's just the tradition of the British actors they're just so damn good in what they do.
At the time, was working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. We were doing Nicholas Nickleby, which we later took to New York, was a huge success in America. I suppose John came to see the show and got in touch because he was making the film.
It was really one of the great things I've seen in theater, and I was so taken with it. I tried to cast everybody in the show. I mean, Lila Kay came from it. John Woodvine came. He played Ralph Nickleby. He was extraordinary. David Schofield.
I was a young actor at the time, and I've got to be honest and say that I was absolutely knocked out to get the gig. It was a fantastic project. It appeared to be very exciting, and I was very happy to be a part of it, yeah. I was a bit nervous, I have to say, because it was one of my first movies. So it was a little nerve-wracking, but very, very exciting, yeah.
The first time we see them, they're in a truckload of sheep. It's not subtle. You know, they're dead. They're dead from the first frame.
You cold? Yeah. Good.
Principal photography started in Wales. We went up there first of all to do the thing when they're walking on the beginning of the film, actually. Then walking over the hills to the village with the slaughtered lamb.
First day on the set, I felt remarkably relaxed. Knew the lines and understood what was needed, and it was just about being natural.
There was a moment where Griffin had snot coming out of his nose, and he got the giggles, and he was waiting for me to say cut, and I didn't.
You know, you think to yourself, they'll never use this, but let's keep going because, you know, there's a lot of preparation, and you don't want to be the one to stop in the middle of a take. And, of course, that's the one they use, in which both Griffin and I are kind of cracking each other up.
My most vivid memory of it, though, was to be on these moors, and quickly between a setup, I had to use the bathroom, and there was nothing around except these vans. They were like little gypsy caravans. Suddenly the pickup truck hitched up to the van, started up, and just drove off with me in the back. And I'm bouncing around, and I couldn't speak to the guy in the pickup truck. And the guy drove me for like 45 minutes. It was like, where did Griffin go? And John, you can imagine, was just freaking out. And I could not get to the guy to tell him to stop. I think he was going to drive all the way back to London. And he pulled to a gas station, and I just banged on the door and went, what the fuck is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And he drove back to the set, and, you know, the whole crew was crazed. They were ready to shoot.
You're right, it is a pub. Okay, well, what do you say? We go in for a little food, huh? Drink? Rest? The slaughtered lamb.
You know, it was a very important scene to set the tone of the movie and the, you know, kind of the evil, dark quality that that pub, you know, represented.
But whatever happens, it's your fault. Right. All right.
Jack and David had to be outsiders in that community. And when we first see them, it was very important that they almost looked like they were astronauts on the surface of the moon, so that later when they appear in the pub, they really look like astronauts. They really look like they come from a completely different place. When people greet them and when they open the door, the entire pub stops and turns around and looks at them.
Hello. Hi. Nice to see you.
I remember thinking, am I going to get away with this? Because it was so much like, you know, classic Western, where they go in and everyone turns and looks, and the music stops, and, you know, the smoke in the air, and look.
It was my first experience of walking up to a door, exterior, opening the door, and then 3 months later closing the door in a completely different place.
And we had to do it in two places, the exterior in Wales and the interior in the Black Swan, I believe, down in Surrey.
Look at that. Yeah, what about it? It's a 5-pointed star.
5-pointed star was not in the pub, and so I personally drew that up on the wall at the correct position, correct angle, and
The rest of it was just regular pub stuff, but did obviously the choreography that went on in there with the dart playing and the movement and the storytelling by the one actor who tells the joke.
Here, Gladys, Tom, did you hear the one about the crashing plane?
It was very funny, almost funny at the time, and everybody laughed on the set.
First of all, I like characters in films telling jokes because, you know, people don't understand about a joke. It's never the joke, it's how the joke is told. Brian Glover, he was such a great character, and when he told the joke, you know, in that accent.
Remember the Alamo? A joke's out the Mexican!
The laugh he gets is a little big, but, you know.
Excuse me. Well, what's that star on the wall for?
You made me miss.
It wasn't a huge part that I had, but I do remember it being my character's moment, his time in the picture. And I knew that it was a significant moment. So I had to stay completely calm, not to blow it.
I've never missed that board before.
Jack, we'd better go.
I'd been to a lot of pubs across England and in Wales and Ireland, and so I thought it was extremely authentic.
Go! Stay on the road. Keep clear of the moors.
The only disappointment about filming there was that the bar was closed while we were working.
Beware the moon, lads.
While writing the screenplay in 1969, John Landis had no idea of how any of the gruesome set pieces in the story were going to be conceivably executed on screen. Thankfully for him, it was down to the makeup wizardry of Rick Baker to work out the specifics. The werewolf, the transformation, and the gruesome aftermath of the wolf's savage attacks.
It's a full moon. Beware the moon. And stick to the road. Oops.
The night exterior moors is not there. It's supposed to be there, but it's not there. It's actually Windsor Great Park. So that was really cold. Oy.
I honestly shot in quite a few different places in the wintertime. New York, Philadelphia, Norway. Never been as cold as out on the Windsor Great Park.
That was when we had to make it rain.
Oh, please, don't rain.
And it was so bitter cold, the pipes froze on the rain trees. So we had to wrap them with like hot water bottles and like electric blankets to melt the ice to make it rain.
Those poor guys with water on them from the rain. I don't know how they survived. We were all in every kind of gear we could get on, and we're still freezing.
You know that scene where they're walking, and for some reason Griffin starts singing
Santa Lucia, Santa Lucia.
When I yelled cut, they both started screaming, come here, come here, come here. We all ran. Their hair had like huge chunks of ice frozen into their hair, and you went like cracked their parkas because the ice from the rain just froze on them. It was cold.
Did you hear that? I heard that.
The howl was great.
What was it? Could be a lot of things.
The wolf sound, I learned later, was a combination of a wolf and there was an elephant sound in there.
I think it was played backwards. I can't remember exactly what they did there.
Oh, shit, David. What is that?
It's a combination of like 7 or 8 different animal howls, cut up and remixed.
It's circling us. Ah, fuck.
I think the first stuff we shot with a wolf was on the moors, the sequence on the moors where the kids get attacked.
Nice doggy. Good boy. Come on, Jack. Walk away. Walking away, yes. Here we are, walking away.
We had several different heads. We had what we called a close-up head, which was the one that had the most mechanisms in it. And then we had a stun head, which was hard teeth, and it had soft teeth because we knew it was going to be attacking Griffin.
The scene was to be mauled to death and be as enthralled in terror as one would be who would be mauled to death and knows they're going to die and is helpless to stop it and is just going down fighting. And I just went there.
I remember that I wanted it to look as horrific as possible, so which is one of the reasons why it's so fast and furious and you can't really see what's going on. And asking Griffin to scream for his life. And Griffin, I think, really got into it, was fighting for his life. It's creepy when you do stuff like that.
I had to go back to the truck for something, and as I was going back, I could hear Griffin Dunn screaming, and it was just so haunting. I mean, it was cold. I was cold. I was walking back to the truck. It was so real, and it just shivers up my spine.
We were in, the Queen's backyard, and I kept picturing the Queen trying to get some sleep, just hearing this kid just being savagely murdered, take after take after take, because I was really being attacked by a man in a wolf mask lying on a wheelbarrow.
I was puppeteering this head, which has this big kind of like two handles that you kind of grab, basically make the mouth open and close, and you can kind of turn the head.
So it's kind of really like, being nibbled by a puppet.
I talked to Griffin and I said, I know this thing's supposed to be killing you and you're supposed to be fighting it, but it is, it was basically this brand new head that we just made. And I said, it's foam rubber, it's a little bit delicate, so you have to be kind of careful with it.
But I don't know how you go. You don't really pet a werewolf as it's chewing your jugular out, so.
But then John says action, and we're doing this, the Jesus fuck scene where he's getting killed, and first take, he grabs hold of the wolf, rips the foam face right off the skull. And it's like, okay. It's like, this is a good start.
It's called acting. I was just so carried away.
And I was none too pleased about it. And I considered putting the hard teeth in. I was thinking, okay, if that's the way he's going to play, let's put the hard teeth in. But I didn't put the hard teeth in. But when John said action, I was just beating the crap out of Griffin with his head. It's just I took my anger out on Griffin, and I was just hitting him with this damn thing and just going. And I think it made the scene that much better, But so I thought, that's the way you're going to play. I'll play rough too.
I remember coming back from London to Los Angeles one time, and I had a werewolf head, and I had a bottle of Kensington Gore, the British blood, and having to explain this to the people in customs. I'd just say, they'd ask, well, Mr. Folsey, what's this? I said, well, it's the head of the werewolf. I said, okay. And what is this? I said, well, that's the blood of the werewolf. All right. So, they just, okay, send him on.
Jack. And then he had me say something like, hi, I'm supposed to look in hi, Sean, how are you? Or something. Which he does on every movie.
Hi, Sean. Hello.
He just would say it after just been screaming my lungs out, And I went, who the fuck is Sean? Why am I talking about Sean? Who the fuck is Sean? Say, hi, Sean. Hi, Sean. I went, hi, Sean. Fuck you, Sean. Fuck you. Hi, Sean. Are we finished?
I remember feeling very sorry for the actor who was playing the wolf, who then had to lie there completely naked, freezing.
I said, I need an older man to lie naked, and it's cold. Paddy Ryan's the first wolf. He's the guy who did it.
And when you watch the picture, you can see the steam rising from him, which was great for the picture, but really is a clue to just how cold it was.
Hello, David. I'm Dr. Hirsch.
He's simply the voice of sanity in the film. And that's all I was aiming for, was just a sort of clarity of straightforward presentation of a sensible man trying to function in the middle of, quite unusual events.
What happened to them?
Well, the police report said they were attacked by an escaped lunatic.
It starts off with a rather severe Dr. Hirsch, firmly putting the nurses in their place.
Although I don't see that it's any concern of yours, Nurse Price.
No, sir.
And evolves into this much closer and more intimate relationship.
You've never had bad dreams before?
Well, sure, as a kid, but never so real, never so weird.
The inexplicable would be explained with, it's another dream sequence. Kind of crazy, wild dreams, you know, that was I having. And in the forest, and they've got smoke machines, you know. Guys are running through the forest, smoking up the whole place. So it was very eerie just to be there, and on film it certainly captured.
If I remember rightly, we were shooting at Burnham Beeches in Hertfordshire, just at the back of Pinewood Studios. John didn't want the ground disturbed at all, so I was basically given a direction in which to travel and just run for it. What I had to do was just make sure that I didn't trip on any twigs or logs as I went along, because it was quite tricky. It's something I'd never done before because it was a new piece of equipment.
I remember I wanted a strange feeling approaching the bed, you know, and the reveal of David in his opera makeup.
It's another one of those makeups that took all day to do, and wearing glass lenses, and all for like, what, 3 seconds of film, but it's effective, and nobody really cares that it took 6 hours to do.
John said, you know, and in the script there was a scene where these things, and it just said Nazi demons, and I go, okay, what's a Nazi demon? He goes, I don't know, something that looks like a Nazi and like a demon.
Well, you're trying to think of the most horrific nightmares you can. What's the most terrible? It's losing loved ones.
I'll get it.
David's not married, doesn't have children, so it would be his parents and his family, and you see them completely decimated by these demons.
I just started making them. First one I did was the one that's in that double dream sequence with the Nazi helmet that stabs Jenny in the dream. And I just figured I'd make this kind of demonic, dead, kind of werewolf-like thing, you know, with a Nazi helmet. I think the second one was the one that's got the kind of face like that, you know. I got it to a point where everything was there, and I handed that one over to Tom Hester to finish.
One of the ones I did was was a bald Nazi demon. Really sort of very squarish face, and it was fun, really going into a lot of the detail of figuring out the teeth and how that was going to look.
There was another one that we did that was more of just, again, like a werewolf. It wasn't a dead werewolf kind of one that Sean McEnroe finished. I blocked out. The other one that was left was one that Steve Johnson did, and I was kind of frankly running out of ideas at the moment and had a lot of stuff to finish, and I said, okay, Steve, you want to do one? And he like took the ball and ran with it, and he did that one, which had the kind of like almost like mohawk and stuff. And they, you know, I was kind of hoping to do makeups with those guys because I was a little concerned about them just being, they're basically like Halloween masks. They're just over the head masks. And John said, no, it's going to be fine. I know how I'm going to shoot this. They really don't have to do much of anything, and they just need to be scary looking. The thing I was more worried about was the slit neck thing. You had this neck slit.
And I remember just hearing that muffled voice inside. Yeah, I can't see very well in here, you know. I go, oh, that's good to hear, you know. Does John put you up to that? You have this appliance, and you don't want it to go off prematurely, because it's going to be a couple more hours of back in the makeup chair. So you do anything not to, please, no more makeup chair.
And in the end, you get a really good one. It's open and it's gorgeous and it's horrible, and yeah, got it. It's not a dream when you're shooting it. Basically, it's for real.
Hello. Have you been up long?
I've just had a nightmare. The concept of the dream within the dream I took directly from a Buñuel film called Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. I turned it around and made it into a scare. Jenny did this thing that really shocked me at the time. She falls to the floor and David screams, and then you cut back to him repeatedly plunging this knife in. And Jenny did this thing. Every time the knife came out, her body sort of jerked. And I thought, oh my God, Jenny. Holy shit.
It's one of my favorite times to watch with an audience when the film was in the theaters, to watch what would happen in the audience reactions. People literally jumping out of their seat.
Can I have a piece of toast?
when it gets very gory, I just don't look.
I thought you'd be glad to see me.
Oh, God, no.
You're hurting my feelings.
God forbid one should have to be sitting next to Griffin Dunne in the morning, first thing before you've had your breakfast, when he's having that ghastly makeup being put on.
Griffin was quite freaked out the first day that Rick Baker put the makeup on him.
You could see as I'm putting these pieces on him with several different pieces. I'm kind of sinking more and more in the chair and just getting more and more depressed. And it's like, what's the matter, Griffin? You know, nothing. You know, go, no, really, something's wrong. What's the matter? And finally said, you know, look at it.
They were putting it on, and first it was all white, and then had this little vein thing in it, and then they started to apply makeup, and I saw I was going to look like it was going to be gruesome. It was going to be really, really gruesome. Quite an unsettling experience, to tell you the truth. I became profoundly depressed because you got a very strong sense of what you would look like if you were dead. My mother was ill at the time, and I remember thinking, my mother can't see this. This will freak her out.
He looked pretty disgusting in real life, so people were like avoiding him. Ooh.
I still remember the first time I saw it. I was like, oh my God.
I look like my throat's been torn out, you know. It's like, this is my big movie break, and nobody's going to want to look at me, you know. And I said, did you read the script? Yeah. And he goes, doesn't it say your throat's torn out and half your face is torn off? Yeah, but somehow I didn't think it was going to look like this, you know. It's like, he wasn't a happy camper at that moment, you know. And I remember sending Polaroids off to John and saying, you know, I think you need to talk to Griffin because he's not real pleased at the moment.
He was pretty shook, and it really took me and John a while to calm him down and convince him that we knew what we were doing. But, you know, he finally got used to it. He was a real trooper about it once he got over his initial reaction.
I realize I don't look so hot, David.
The initial test that I did on Griffin, I had blood all over him and dirt and stuff. And that's where one thing where John did have something to say about, and he wanted him to be perfectly clean when he shows up in the hospital the first time, other than the wounds. He wanted it to be, you know, wanted him to make sure that it was Griffin there, you know. So
yeah, we just hoped it could be captured on film because it looks so great. And it was, you know, glistening, and they were in there painting it so it looked fresh.
It was so realistic with the flesh and the little pieces of flesh hanging.
Everybody talks about the little, you know, dangly part.
I thought that was really horrible.
It wasn't, they intentionally planned it to do that. It was just this little piece that I put on there. And because it was wet and had weight of the water on it, when he would talk, that little thing would move, and it turned out to be one of those fun things that happens, you know. So that was stage one. Stage two was a makeup and many more appliances to try to make him look a little more gaunt and a little more rotten. And it was, you know, kind of greenish colored.
What are you doing here? I wanted to see you. Hi, David. Put that down.
It was pretty thick as far as appliances go, but I really wanted the neck to have some depth. You know, I wanted to really see the, you know, the thyroid cartilage and stuff in there, and he was basically all covered with appliances at that point.
You've got to take your own life.
I remember that I had to get up at 4 in the morning as opposed to 5. I could appreciate it, and I could appreciate how exciting it was for everyone else putting it on. But to be the guy sitting in the chair from 4 in the morning for 6-7 hours, you know, the thrill of that wore off pretty quick. You know, I would just sit there and patiently try not to go out of my mind.
I'm not having a nice time here.
I was a fidgety guy who just wanted to pull it off the minute it was on. You know, it's glue. They glued it to your face. In the heat, it would constrict. It was like being eaten alive by ants.
Tomorrow night's the full moon. You're gonna change. You'll become...
I know. A monster.
Now, it's behind this closed door here that one of the pinnacle moments in the film takes place, that in which David Kessler turns into the four-legged hound from hell. Now, for Rick Baker, it was without a doubt the biggest test of his career, to realistically show the transformation from a young man into a werewolf, while at the same time using bright, harsh fluorescent lighting. A special effects sequence which to this day remains the most impressive in cinema history.
The transformation that Rick and I discussed for years, finally I wanted it in bright light. I wanted no cutaways. He even said to me, make me storyboards. I hate making storyboards, but we did for the werewolf stuff. You know, we really discussed it a long time, and then he realized it.
John definitely had input in the stuff that he did in Werewolf, and he also was good about, you're the guy, you're the artist that does this stuff, you do it. Do a certain amount of time to make this stuff. And all of a sudden it was like time to ship stuff to England, and we weren't totally ready. So we had a workshop in England, which was in Richmond, which is near Twickenham, and it was this old abandoned schoolhouse where we finished most of the stuff. The change-o heads were finished there. We punch and hair the change-o head in Richmond, finishing these parts. I mean, John was smart because I said, the makeups take a while, so we can't do a lot in a day. So he figured that the transformation would be like a post-production thing.
It took us a week to shoot it. We'd shoot 1, maybe 2 shots a day with David Naughton in a makeup preparation for maybe 4 or 5 hours.
6 days of shooting, 10 hours a day. 5 a.m. call and come out in the afternoon. It was a long week.
Jesus Christ! I always thought if your body's going to go through such a huge change, it's going to hurt. I wanted it to be painful.
David was going to rip his clothes off. He says, I'm burning up or whatever it is, and be standing there in this brightly lit room. And, the first thing that happens is his hand, he brings his hand up. It had a really simple mechanism in it. Basically, if you have a syringe with the plunger out and a plastic tube going to another syringe with the plunger in, and you push the plunger in on this syringe, that plunger goes out. Real basic pneumatic ram. So it's basically this plastic piece with 4 syringes in it. You push this plunger and the hand would stretch out.
Someone I really care for, then suddenly there appears for me.
Cut around to the other side. It's one that we sculpted, stretched out. It's got the beginnings of a pad and the fingers kind of bent in a werewolf-like position. Bill Sturgeon is on the floor holding this rod that the hand was part of, and David's real arm is just down, and we tried to align it so it looked like that was his hand sticking out, which was out of, elbow was out of frame. David is not, he didn't have chest hair, he isn't hairy at all. The first thing we shot with David was him with the most amount of hair glued onto his body. And I said to John, more practical for us to shoot that first and then trim the hair, and then shoot this, and then trim the hair and shoot this, pull some hair off and trim it, and then shoot this one. So that's kind of what we did. So we didn't shoot it necessarily in sequence. Once David's change of hand stretches out, we had a makeup that matched that. So it was an appliance hand, that kind of ended here. It was with David's real thumb, but his fingers were inside the palm because the palm stretched out and they were like sculpted fingers. I just remember this day when we were putting this makeup on him, and vividly remembered David eating some fish and chips with these stupid hands on that he couldn't do anything with.
Help me!
He had cast of David's feet with syringes in it that stretched out.
Some of the most startling effects were the easiest to do, like the hair growing out of the flesh. Did he tell you how he did that?
He just this flat piece of this smooth-on urethane that, with hair punched through it.
He just did all his hair, and then he pulled it backwards so that you just screened it backwards and all the hair came out. It was really simple stuff.
And I remember we were all doing that one particular one, the change her back. And we were doing that for most of the day. It was all pneumatic with plungers, and we were blowing air through tubes to get them to do the effect.
It was cleverly set up so parts of his bodies were obscured by pieces of furniture and things, which made it easier for us to be able to just do these individual parts and not have to make up his whole body. Then he rolls over and he lands on the ground. That's the big stretched out body that was, David in a hole in the set.
In the floor, it was another day where I'm actually in the floor of the set and couldn't get out for 4 hours or so. And I go, I don't know that, can you do this to an actor?
The set was built off the floor by about 4 feet. I think we came to that height as being the optimum height for puppeteers to work underneath and manipulate the animatronics.
David, lying back with his arms and head sticking out of a hole, and the rest of it is this whole fake body that Tom Hester sculpted. I thought was really cool.
My father's an orthopedic surgeon, so I've always been interested in anatomy and really enjoyed, figuring out how to make the veins, on the surface sort of show up at one spot and then dive down below the surface and then show up again. Not super monsterish style, but try to make it realistic in a way.
It had a couple rods sticking out the ankles that we could move the feet with. I remember when we were filming, I was never really happy with how they were looking. And I remember after we decided we had it, we got David out of the hole. I remember looking at the body by itself without arms or head, convulsing exactly the way I wanted it to do. I'm like, this is what we should have got. Why, what are you doing? Why are you doing it now? And it's like, what are you talking about? And I go, you're puppeteering exactly the way it should be. He goes, we're just trying to pull the fucking rods out, and they're just trying to get these rods out of the thing. And it was just doing exactly what I wanted, So then David had an appliance on that looked like the change-o head number 1, hair and more hair around his neck and stuff.
I mean, these appliances, there were pieces that throughout that would be applied to your forehead and nose, and then they'd blend it, and make it up, and then add hair individually, strands of it.
David was really a lot of fun to work with. He was no problem, and he had a hard part, and he had a lot more to deal with the makeups and with the long makeup time. When we put him in the hole in the ground for the transformation thing, I mean, I remember that being something like 10 hours of us goofing around and where he couldn't move. But he was great through the whole process. He never really bitched and moaned about it. And, I'm sure it was a grueling experience for him. Purposely, John wanted the head to change last. He didn't want the head to change very much because he wanted the transformation to, basically kind of almost climax with the head change. All the changeable parts we made out of a urethane that this company called Smooth On made. That was a new product at the time, and it had like an A, B, and C component. The A being the base material, and the B being the catalyst, and the C was a plasticizer. So you could plasticize this to make it more stretchy. So we did some tests, and we did like double the amount that they said you could do. So we had this really stretchy rubber. I also thought it would be something that would probably last. And I was really wrong. The plasticizer continued to work on the urethane until it just turned into snot. And we also found out plasticizer attacked any kind of plastic that it was around. And we found this water-extended resin. It was this weird thing. I don't know how we found it, but it was a different kind of resin, and it ended up working. So that's what we made the mechanisms out of.
Took a life cast of David Naughton, and then Rick sculpted from there. So he did the sculpture, did the mold. Once you do the mold, we core it out a certain thickness, and we ended up with this, which is the core that the skin goes over. And at that point, basically just cut all the pieces out, put the mechanics on, and just keep working it until it's in exactly the right place to give the effect we're looking for.
I was worried about making eyes that looked real enough and getting the eye mechanism to work in this head that was going to be stretching and moving. And we purposely closed the eyes in the change. And the eyes are squinting up in like pain because I just knew it was going to be a problem to make the eyes look right. We took a life cast of David Naughton, making a pained expression. And again, I used a clay press out of that cast and then sculpted the nose a little bit more like it's starting to change, and just changed it enough so it wasn't just human David. It was just a face cast, and then I sculpted the rest of the head and the shoulders to make the first change-o head. And then I did another one, which was the second stage change-o head. On that one, it's asymmetrical. One side is more human, one side is more wolf-like. And my thinking was it could start shooting on the human side. It would turn, and then it would get more out of the change-o head. But we found out as we were shooting it, when we turned the head, in the faster in the more movement there was, you actually didn't see the stretching out of the face, which was the kind of big payoff on this whole piece. So we ended up not using it that way with the turn. We ended up just with a straight profile with it, kind of stretching and shaking as it goes out. We spent all this time making these change-o heads, and it really took very little time to shoot it. John would say action, and we'd pull our lever that stretched the face out and push the plungers and turn the head or whatever we did, shake it a little bit, and it cut. That's it? We worked on this for months, It's like we do a couple takes and that's it. He goes, does it do anything else? No. I said, well, we've got it. And I go, yeah, that's disappointing, I mean, it's like we spent all this time and we can shoot it in a couple minutes. Suspiciously, the room gets darker for some reason. And it's mainly because we didn't want it to go all the way to the hairy wolf creature, but we wanted something there. So that very last thing that you see in the transformation was something that we just built in the last minute. It was mostly Tom Hester.
We had an additional casting of the body for the transformation scene. So we used that, folded it up into a crouched position, and then just fabricated some foam arms and shoulders. And I think there was a head, was another casting from the original wolf mold. I took that and carved it down, shrunk it down a little bit so it wasn't meant to be as big as the final werewolf. So it was all sort of cut and paste polyfoam, and then I put latex over the surface of it, and laid hair on the body, and that was set up, as a rod puppet that we worked from underneath.
That's the transformation, and unfortunately, this stuff was all kind of new in its infancy, and I had a crew of basically inexperienced kids, and I wasn't all that experienced myself.
Rick was really hands-on. I mean, I was basically, I'd do it. He'd say, move it an inch to the left. I'd go back in, move it an inch to the left, show it to him. He'd say, move it a quarter inch to the right, and then I'd go do that, and I just doing it until it was exactly what Rick wanted.
He was very generous with his knowledge and his time. His manner was excellent. I mean, he never seemed to get hassled about anything in the makeup room. Just get on with the job, full concentration, spirits high.
It was brilliant. It was, and very modest with it too. Just got on, did his job and made it happen. You just stood there and watched it happen, and it was amazing, and we all thought it was magic.
It was definitely the biggest thing I had done to that point. The transformation takes place in this brightly lit room, which I wasn't too pleased about. It's nice to have shadows and moody lighting to kind of hide things a little bit.
It was totally outrageous for me to ask him to have it done in bright light. I mean, that's the most unforgiving.
Then the fact that he's playing this, it wasn't a scored piece where the music is helping us. It's like he's playing Blue Moon in the background.
There's very little score in American Werewolf. Homer was a great friend and did a lot of movies for us.
He wrote a beautiful score, a lovely score that we recorded in a church in London. He wanted desperately to write the music for the Metamorphosis, and I said, but Elmer, I know I'm using Sam Cooke's Blue Moon.
We used the song Blue Moon 3 times, and the third time was in the main title, and it was never intended to be used there. That was supposed to be Moon Shadow by Cat Stevens.
I love the song, but if you listen to it, it's sort of light and airy, but he's talking about dismemberment. Quite a grisly song.
We're horrified to find out that Cat Stevens felt that we couldn't use his music that way.
He decided werewolves were real or something and didn't want to have his music used in anything.
Bob Dylan had the same problem for different religious reasons, but also religious reasons, for not letting us use his version of Blue Moon.
It was very ethereal, Bob Dylan's version. I liked it a lot, and at that moment in time, Bob was born again, and I couldn't buy it for an R-rated film.
One of my favorite ones of the Blue Moon is the Sam Cooke version. You would think that the transformation sequence would be horrific and really very, very scary. In fact, it is very sad and painful.
I didn't mean to call you meatloaf, Jack.
That was like, oh boy, is this great?
There's an interesting thing about songs that are not kind of a soundtrack behind, but that suddenly appear, and I think they helped tremendously to create this kind of anarchic, unconventional view of the story we were telling.
It's really tricky to do it, and people do it all the time, and it's usually not very good, and they're just trying to force in songs to sell albums. In this case, I thought we did okay in terms of using the pop songs to drive the story.
Well, it makes it sort of a time capsule. I can't hear some of those songs without thinking of the film.
That's $1.50, please.
Which one, Harry?
The actress who played the sort of upper-class twit girl, Brenda, she was freezing cold, and no matter what we did, she was shivering. So their murder is actually cut short.
The night that we did the filming on Hampstead Heath was very, very, very cold. And I was so cold I couldn't stop shivering, so we did take after take of me hearing the sound and this kind of wolf thing jumping at me.
Hey, did you hear something?
Just now?
Yes.
No.
I think after about 20 or 30 takes, we had to abandon it because I couldn't stop shaking before they took the shot.
I'd seen a film many years ago called Raw Meat about this guy living in the subways And I just remember thinking, what a wonderfully creepy place a subway is. I just thought, this is a good place for murder.
I was ill. There was a flu going around London, and I got it. And I'd lost a lot of weight, and I felt very weak. And of course, the last thing you want to do when you feel like that is do what we did down at Tottenham Court Road Tube Station.
Hello? Is there someone there?
Filmed all night. About 4 o'clock in the morning, all the oxygen had disappeared. But I think there was something wrong with the Steadicam remote, so we couldn't get everything absolutely pin sharp. So we're doing a lot of takes, and Ray, the Steadicam op, was following me, and I thought I was going to die.
I can assure you that this is not in the least bit amusing.
It was unusual to actually undersling the Steadicam, and I had a bracket made whilst working on a previous film, and I was able to drop the camera down to about 3 foot above the ground, which gave the lovely effect of the wolf's point of view.
Good Lord.
John asked me to do a running shot with Mike, and the normal thing in those days was to ask Mike to just cut their speed down, because when the camera is travelling with them, it looks fast enough as it is. But John didn't want that, and so I had to do this flat out.
I said, when he falls on those escalator, I want it to really hurt. I went, God, are you all right? He was fine. But that's a good stunt.
That shot, last thing, the camera comes up, and I'm on the staircase, and John is saying, I want to see death in your face.
We wanted to shoot in the Royal Zoo. Fortunately, John had some connections to a member of Parliament, and I was able to get to the authorities. It took me a couple of days to convince them that, we would shoot before with a naked man in the zoo.
Thank you.
We would shoot before any parents would bring young children there.
They were interesting, the wolves, because they were wolves. What makes you nervous about any wild animal, makes you nervous about wolves, is you think they're big dogs, but they're not. They can turn around and go, It's incredible how quickly he climbs out of that place.
You read it in the script, it doesn't look like a big deal. Hey, wakes up at the zoo. It was one of those things that you just, stay in character, and the only time it gets awkward is when they cut, and now you're just a naked guy standing in a street corner.
Excuse me.
That was so funny, because, again, this was a woman who didn't know what was, going to be done. See, there's going to be a man coming out from around this bush, and he's just going to say something to you, so you just are startled when he comes out. That was literally the direction that she was given. I remember talking to her afterwards. She said, I didn't look down.
And John thought he would have a joke, and he asked me if I would take a part in the picture. And at first I said, no, you can't get, I can't act and stuff.
A lot of weather we've been having lately.
So I was the man at the bus stop, and I had to look round in disgust. But whilst I was doing that, all the electricians stood in a line and mooned. They pulled their trousers down and sort of tried to make me laugh during. So it must have taken about 4 or 5, 6 shots to be able to get that take. But it was fun, and I got 2 credits on the film for that. That was my reward.
When we shot in the city of London, we really didn't have too many problems in terms of that.
Well, there was official procedure, which was it was down to the bobby on the beat.
Officer! Officer, I killed those people last night.
He could say piss off, and you were fucked.
All right, you two, move along, right?
Because I had done such extensive urban shooting in Chicago on the Blues Brothers, I had the Metropolitan Police at Scotland Yard speak to the Chicago cops.
John was great at setting. He's a great salesman. He could sell anything. and he could sell this. He said, I've been shooting the Blues Brothers. You want to come and see it? It's on in Warner Brothers, Leicester Square. I'll get you tickets anytime. You'll see what we did there.
And what's great about John is he knows what he wants, and you don't go through a lot of the BS that you do with a lot of other directors. He gives you the freedom. He gives you guidance. He answers the questions and made some fun stuff.
Landis is terrific to work with as an actor. First of all, he has an absolute knowledge of actors. He really enjoys them, and he likes getting things out of them, and he knows what you're doing, so that you feel very safe that when he edits things together, he's not going to leave you with egg on your face, because he's going to look for all the best things. He never allows moments to die on set. He's permanently up, talking, joking, talking about what's going on, talking about things that he's doing, just making jokes.
He was the first real director I worked with, guy who knew how to talk to actors and hang out with us after shooting, and I've become a director since, and I think of John a lot. He's very direct, and when he hates something, he just says it, that was terrible, terrible, and you don't take an offense.
Very animated, very enthusiastic, and a lot of fun. Now, I smile every time I say his name.
It's interesting. The only change in the screenplay from 1969 to 1981 was in the Aero cinema. When I wrote the script, it was cartoon cinema. And it was the same thing, only it was cutting to cartoon violence, like a Roadrunner cartoon or something. And when I came back in 81 to scout, the Aero cinema had suddenly become a porno cinema.
How much is it?
£2.80, sir.
And I thought, what do I do? So we made our own little porno.
The first thing we shot when we were at Twickenham Studios was this porno sequence. We had never worked with any of these people in the British crew. Joyce Hurley, David Tringham, Bob Painter. So the first thing we're doing is this porno. So I think we shot 2 days to do the porno. And the crew was sort of like, okay, what is this movie?
I said, well, what about a script for it then? They're going to say anything?
What are you doing here? You promised never to do this kind of thing again. I never promised you any such thing. Not you, you Twitter.
I've never seen you before in my life.
Oh, sorry.
I had a model agent and they sent me for an audition and I went to meet John. I can't remember where I actually had to go. I think it might have been Twickenham or somewhere, the film studios. I just went along and met him. He seemed very nice and I was really surprised I got the job. He did explain it really well, just saying, we're making this horror movie and it's very funny and it's very horrific. And then there's one scene in it which is, a porno movie that we're filming especially to add that comic element.
Jesus Christ.
That whole scene in there, I like that the soundtrack is this orgasmic woman, Lindsay is coming during the whole. It's very odd. I like it.
We shot that about 3 weeks before principal photography began, and we got these performers, and they built the sets and put flats all around to stop onlookers, because in the studios you can't lock everybody up, and just the camera crew and people. And it really was hilarious. And as the day went by, you could see holes appearing in these flats, people looking through, spying on it.
The one funny thing I do remember is at the end they did a little funny bit to camera. I couldn't work out what was happening, but John Landis put a screen up in front and he sat and was saying it was the first thing he'd ever written. And he was saying it's very funny, very horrific. And then the screen comes down, and obviously we're all in the back, all four of us on the bed, jumping up and down, bouncing up and down.
Again, this is just one of the other areas where I think the crew was like, all right, we'll just have to put up with these idiot Americans and get through this because they're paying us and whatever.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, David. I talked to Griffin, and it's like, I got some other bad news for you then, like what? When the sequence in the porno theater, it's going to be a puppet. It's not really going to be you. It's like, what? It's like a third of his part.
I was quite threatened by the damn puppet. And I remember being quite genuinely upset and kind of hurt, I think.
But he wanted to do it. But, you can't tear off people's faces. You could build on a skull, but it's hard to tear off if it's a real person.
We did a big foam mask to look like the the skeletal puppet. And we thought it would work for Far Away. I mean, it looked pretty good, actually, but it's just bulkier. And, makeup's an additive process, and I wanted to do something where we took away, and I started with a life cast of Griffin, and it basically first made what I thought would be Griffin's skull based on that life cast, and then made a piece on the face that was the remaining flesh, which is just a little thin appliance that went over it, and I think just a polyfoam neck piece that went on there, and part of the polyfoam body.
You look awful. Thank you.
To operate that puppet, there was a cutaway under the floor with a partition of the cinema seats. Griffin Dunn was operating the jaw.
These guys, were very gracious of letting me have the controls, and it was very helpful. I'd be looking at a monitor to see how I would look, and it was a very unique experience to be an actor playing that part, controlling the way I spoke. It was, I thought, a totally fair trade-off.
I want you to meet some people. David Kessler, this is Gerald Bringsley.
The whole filming was a long 3 days. I remember I stood on a pile of beer crates because I was next to the puppet. So I didn't have a seat. I was standing. The other two on the side were sitting. I remember John wanted me to be very heavy, playing really kind of... and the other two to be very light and twittery.
You must die, David Kessler.
David, this is Harry Berman and his fiancée, Judith Browns. Hello.
Hello. They kept pouring more and more and more blood over me, and there came a point where I actually didn't want any more blood being dribbled all over my face, but still, it was wonderful to see yourself change.
We had more blood there than I'd ever used before, 20 gallons, I think. John just said, more.
That was his mantra. More blood!
I do remember very carefully putting blood on them, trying to make sure that it didn't get in their eyes and things. And Landis just going, no, here, give me the blood. And just like dumping it on their heads,
It wasn't the makeup person, it was John. Just pouring blood over us all the time, all bloody time.
He was just pouring it all over them. It was going in their eyes and everywhere, but it's kind of how it would be,
The gun!
We did have a terrific time when we were covered in blood and we were covered in scabs, and we were having our lunch, and we'd been asked if we'd sit to one side because people were being put off by the fact that we were covered in blood and scabs. And as we were eating our lunch, bits of our faces were falling off into our meals, and we were having to pick the bits out. And because he thought it was so funny, we just laughed our way through it, whereas it could have been horrible.
You must take your own life. That's easy for you to say. You're already dead.
No, David. Harry and I and everyone you murder are not dead. The undead.
The undead come back to bitch and moan about being undead and try to convince him to kill himself.
I could hang myself. No, if you did it wrong, it could be painful. You'd choke to death.
So what? Let him choke.
I like how the bums are so pissed off, and they're vindictive. Jack feels the need to defend him.
Do you mind? The man's a friend of mine.
I brought him here so that you can convince him to kill himself, but you don't have to be so, hurtful about it. It's just... I mean, I always envisioned it to be four-legged. I wanted to be this great big beast.
I wanted it to be biped. And I was actually hoping for something a little more on the man side as well. I thought it was kind of interesting, that kind of combination of animal and person. But John said, four-legged hound from hell.
For God's sake, show me the butchery here!
John always said he's never going to show me that. Because I don't really want to see the wolf other than just for a couple seconds. And that's one reason, he's sculpted with an extreme kind of expression to begin with. I was worried that if we relied totally on the mechanism to make the expression, that they would use a part when it isn't making an expression. We'd shoot something, but they'd cut it in before or after when it was, So I thought if it's only going to be this long, let's make it look scary, no matter, even if we're not pulling any cables or doing anything.
I think Rick based it on his dog.
I had two dogs at the time. I had a German Shepherd, a white German Shepherd, and a Keeshond, or Keeshan, as they're called sometimes, which was this Harrier dog and kind of almost wolf-like, A lot of times I'll look in the mirror and I'll make faces and kind of like be working on sculptures, and it kind of looks like me, and my dog was there. So I was like, okay, he's kind of like a wolf, you know. He's got 4 legs, and he had this big mane of hair, which the wolf kind of had. And so yeah, it was very much based on my dog Bosco.
I didn't really get an impression of the size of the creature on the film. I mean, I think the only time you see it up close against another human being is when it bites the detective's head off.
What the hell's going on here?
Some kind of animal, sir.
The head. Did Rick tell you about the head?
Frankly, it wasn't all that exciting. And John said, I'm never going to see it. I'm just going to see it bounce.
I've directed several movies now in the UK, and only once did I have a communication problem. I took the head, and I said, okay, the next shot, just get a little Dutch on the hood of the car, this car right here, and we'll throw the head in, and it'll bounce off. And the whole crew's looking at me like this. And I'm like, I want you to take the head and bounce it off the hood of the car, and we'll get a shot. And finally I said, look, and I took the head and I walked over and I put it on the hood of the car. And it was like a light bulb went off. They all went, oh, the bonnet. You mean the bonnet? Oh, okay. Why didn't you say so?
To actually make it look like there's a real wolf running through Piccadilly Circus. You know, we tried a dog in a werewolf suit and it looked kind of clunky. And finally, Rick came up with this kind of thing that we could sort of move around.
Just remember one night not sleeping and getting up and actually thinking about how we used to do this wheelbarrow race thing when you were a kid, where somebody would hold your feet and you would just walk on your hands, you know. And I thought, well, if we could do something kind of like that and make some fake back legs, maybe that would work. And that's kind of what we did. I talked to Doug Beswick, and Doug made this board. It's basically just a plank with a little hinge in it where the waist is, and you put somebody on it and you could kind of walk. And one of the guys that was on my crew, this guy Kevin Brennan, we made the wolf suit to fit him. When we were in England, we had decided to make it like a tag team thing, and got this other guy, Brendan Hughes, somebody that we found that was Kevin's size, to play the wolf.
It wasn't a stuntman, he was a trained dancer who had this really strong torso, so he could hold himself in there at this awkward angle and just be with his legs sticking out at the end with nothing to support them, really. It was clever.
I became enamored of Rick's work, so I showed it too much. I still think when I see the movie, you see it too much, the wolf. But my favorite shot of the wolf in the picture is the guy in the tubes when he collapses on the escalator and looks down, and the wolf enters like that at the bottom of the escalator. And that's my favorite shot because it looks so fucking big. And what is that, you know? And you don't really see it, but you see it. I like that.
John always laughs and would say things like, well, of course, you know, the most gross moment is created because a bus tries to avoid a dog on the street.
It was very, very, very difficult to get them, the authorities in London, to allow us to shoot in Piccadilly Circus. But Joyce Hurley was the one who said, I think we can make this work, and she did.
That was the big problem, because even on Saturday night or early Sunday morning, there was still traffic going around there, and we had to talk to the police.
We had a meeting, I remember, about 7 o'clock at night, one night after shooting, with the commissioner, the chief of police. And in Piccadilly Circus, we've got this fantastic sequence with the bus and turning around and people coming everywhere and this wolf coming out and creating mayhem. And the police said, really? And how are you going to do that? He said, well, ask him. Well, what we'll do is we'll have stuntmen in each of these streets, about 7 streets, is it, coming into Piccadilly Circus, and waiting in cars, and then we'll have extras on the pavements to keep back the public, and we have 5 to 7. Well, how many cameras, John? 7, 8. 8 cameras. We have 8. Guess what I thought? 8 cameras all over the place. One in the bus, up on the buildings, in the street, everywhere. And then when you give us the nod, we'll say stand by, and then when we say action, all the vehicles will drive out into the streets so that no public cars, vehicles can get past. Wolf will come out, the bus will do a turn, somebody will fall out, there'll be cars smashed everywhere, and then we'll say, cut. We'll come out and they'll sweep up all the glass, sweep up all the broken vehicles, and the place will be clear and the public will be through, and it will happen in seconds.
We had the opportunity to rehearse for 2 weeks, which we had to do. We were going to shoot in Piccadilly. Now, the police had not let anybody shoot in Piccadilly for something like 15 years.
We did 2 nights, the Saturday night into Sunday and the Sunday into Monday, and we were told that we had to be finished by 6 o'clock on Monday morning.
So we had to go in there 100% totally prepared. Like, we rehearsed it as best we could. Then we got a guy called Dave Bickers in, who's one of the best engineers and car prep people in the world, and he had his wrecking crews there, parked up every side street, and I think it's something like 2 minutes 30 seconds from saying action to having the roads swept and clean and ready for public transport. The bus had to do its 180-degree spin, and I never did the spins in the rehearsals because the bus does not spin. Dave Bickers was there. He said, well, I could do that for you, all right, he said. I'd have cut a hole in the bottom of your bus, and we went, you can do what you like with it. You can do it. He said, oh, it'd take me 2 days. I said, fantastic. And he took one of our air rams, inverted it, basically put 10-inch forklift rubber wheels under it, and at the press of a button then, lifted the inside wheel about 3/4 inch off the ground, and went on going into the spin. So now you had wheels going at 90 degrees, and I could do 360-degree spins in it all day long.
Chief of Police said to me, you cleared that bus away quicker than we clear accidents, which I thought was rather a feather in our cap.
Because it wasn't just the big crash with the bus, and I mean, involved like 15, 20 vehicles. It was that we had to do it, get it off the street in 2 minutes, do it again. And this is what Les Dilley did great. We built a reproduction of the corner of, I think, Shaftesbury and Piccadilly, a street that the theater's on, but only like a story and a half high.
That I reproduced down at the airport. I think it was an ex-airport, old airport in Weybridge. Yeah. And built the whole street and shop fronts.
He had a great idea that I was thinking, how are we going to match our set to the real place exactly? And Les said, no, we should match the real place to our set, which he meant the dressing. And that was quite brilliant. So it was identical because we just brought our stuff and put it in their windows. But the Bureau de Change, where I go crashing through the window.
Well, John was a stuntman, and it was very good.
Because I had worked with some of the stunt guys before, they said, why aren't you doing a stunt, John? So I said, okay, I'll do a stunt. Because I didn't want to do anything hard. So I said, I'll go through the window.
I hit him and hammered him through the window. He's brilliant. No stuntman could have done it better. It was fantastic.
When I did it, the balsa wood didn't break. I hit this thing and I was supposed to go right through it and through the glass.
All the crew held up their marks and they all gave me a 2 out of 10, and he got really upset. He said, I wasn't that bad. He said, no, but you weren't that good.
I was convinced that one of them had sabotaged it. Like, you bastards. It actually worked incredibly well, and was complicated because we just didn't have enough time at the real location.
Sister Hobbs said there's a disturbance in Piccadilly Circus involving some sort of mad dog.
David.
A tremendous amount of the success of the film is Jenny and John Woodvine, because when they believe it, you believe it. She brings a tremendous integrity and sincerity. So at the end, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell this hairy puppet that you love it.
David! Is it you?
I was slightly puzzled by what exactly one was doing, because, of course, there's one thing if you're talking to a wolf, there's another thing, because I had the reality through the whole thing of having a boyfriend who just happened to be a werewolf, but it worked as a character, But suddenly I'm faced with this idea of a person, talking to a wolf down an alleyway. And John said, no, it's David. You see David down there.
David. They're going to kill you.
Then, of course, when you see the piece edited together, there's I'm looking down there very earnestly, and then there's a shot to this wolf going, and I go, I love you, very earnestly to this wolf, which of course is very funny.
She pulled it off. I thought she was really moving.
I love you, David.
We had a lot of problems with the censors. There was a lot more concern about the nudity than the violence, and it was kind of surprising to us.
They hated David making love to Jenny, basically.
There were some nudity issues, and there was the issue of the sequence of the bombs.
Here! Who's there?
That's not Winston.
There's a scene I shot that's part of that sequence where the wolf bites down on one of the bums and pulls him out of the shot.
Mary, Mother of God!
And then his body comes back in, missing, like torn like here. It was very violent and very shocking. And in my first two previews in New York and Chicago, the audience was so stunned by it that they started talking for the next 5 minutes. Holy shit, did you see that? Well, after a big scare. So, like an idiot, I thought, shh, you're missing all this exposition. So I just cut the scene, which is too bad because, I probably should have left.
I think there was another one, too. It was something to do with Griffin's face.
Jack, he's eating a piece of toast. So I had at one point, a piece fell, like it went right through him and fell on. We pushed it off, but the rating board thought that was too much. I don't know why.
I was surprised, though, that that would be something that they would object to. Blood, yes. Gore, yes. But toast falling through an open throat, I don't know. There must be a new category or something.
John Peters and Peter Guber came to the cutting room to see the finished film, and they were quite taken aback by the gore and very upset and ranting. And I said, okay, give me your notes.
There was a lot of heat going back and forth about the violence.
I said, give us a week to 10 days to address these notes and then come back. So they went away. They came back in 10 days. We showed them the exact same movie.
Good movie. Mm-hmm.
And they liked it.
If anything, I thought it would be more graphic. But when you think about it, it's really not that much on-screen violence.
They really thought I'd made all their changes. Didn't do a damn thing.
A lot of people liked the script, thought it was really interesting. And a lot of people were very, very put off by it and really didn't think it was very good. And when they saw the movie, they said, my God, you've completely rewritten. It's totally different. And it wasn't. If you look at the script and you follow the dialogue, it's identical.
Jack. David.
You're not having a good time, are you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, look around. Isn't this a fun place?
Well, I like it here.
Before its official release on August the 21st, 1981, the film was subjected to 2 test screenings. This would determine whether or not a rowdy John Landis audience were ready for the shock and horror that they clearly were not expecting.
It was Chicago first. This theater in Chicago, they had put on the marquee the new comedy from the director of Animal House. So the place is packed, and they're really loving the movie until Jack is murdered. And then I'd say, 45% of the people got up and left. And then after Jack, I'll never forget it. We're like, oh my God. We literally ended up like 100 people out of 1,000 people. So the next night in Syosset, Long Island, which for many years was the largest grossing theater in the country, it was all kids on a Saturday night. And I went out before the movie started this. Hello, I'm John Landis. I'm the director of this movie. I have to warn you, I said, this movie's full of nudity and violence. The whole audience went, yay! I said, that's a horror film. Yay! So they loved the movie. And I think the difference was expectations.
When I went to see the film for the very first time, Landis actually insisted we all went, Griffin and David and myself, we all went, not to the premiere uptown in a posh cinema, but went downtown to a fairly seedy cinema.
What was that?
I don't know.
I'll check on the house.
And John's going, no, this is the place, this is where you have to see it with a proper audience, a real audience. And he just knew that people were going to react.
And of course, I took my young daughters along, and they both buried their heads in my lap. At the first sign of danger.
I was absolutely not bowled over. I thought it was really good. Everybody was. We thought, hey, we worked on a really good movie. At last, we worked on a good movie.
We saw the film. I went with the boys to Westwood.
I don't even remember anything about the movie. I was just basically waiting for the transformation. And when the transformation happened, everybody clapped in the theater.
And it was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, we did it. We made this thing and people cheered.
I guess there had been Wolfen and The Howling, a couple of other werewolf movies. Before that, it must have been 20 years since they had done anything like that. And, of course, the year we come out, there's 2 other werewolf movies, which kind of took the edge off us a bit.
No one really appreciated it either at the time. I remember vividly the reviews were quite negative.
It didn't get all bad reviews, but it didn't get very good reviews.
In general, John never got particularly good reviews on any of the movies he did.
I was a critic for the New York Times, a woman, and she wrote a pretty unflattering review of An American Werewolf in London, in which she praised Jenny's performance and Griffin and David and Rick Baker's work. I mean, she made out a nice sentence. And then she said, the picture almost works despite the ham-fisted screenplay and direction by John Landis. So John Belushi calls me up from New York. Do you see the New York Times? Yeah. Did you fuck her? I just remember that.
It actually put critics in a bad mood that, why doesn't John Landis decide what he wants to make, a horror movie or a comedy? You can't do both.
Oh, be serious, would you?
John likes and knows horror films, and he's a funny guy. He has a good sense of humor.
The audience understood that was the genius, what was unique and special about the movie.
It's not just a horror movie. The comedy was very funny.
Yes, sir?
A naked American man stole my balloon.
What?
And the blend seemed to be just right, but I'm sure that it was helped by that, by the reality of the characters and the warmth. You actually liked them and you actually cared about them.
The audience had to believe that they could be Jack and David, that could be them.
Everyone relates to the feeling of being strangers in a strange land and being in the wrong place and camaraderie, and it's a very straightforward story.
Shakespeare once said, the play's the thing. And the fact is, John had put together a tremendous, gripping, interesting, page-turning story that was rooted in character.
It just speaks to people. I mean, most people are used to, moors with mists and, Lon Chaney, who's just a middle-aged guy in a wolf suit, These were kids.
Look at me. Here I sit in a porno theater in Piccadilly Circus talking to a corpse.
As long as you believe that Griffin Dunn's character is dead and he's come back to warn his friend.
The supernatural, the power of darkness, it's all true.
There's nothing else that you have to suspend belief about.
I understand, all right. You're one of the undead, and I'm a werewolf.
And the makeup holds up, Credit to Rick again.
He got the accolades quite rightly.
I was very shocked at the whole Academy Award thing. I mean, for one, there wasn't ever a real category for makeup. I got nominated, couldn't even believe that, to actually get an Oscar and be up there and have some, Vincent Price and Kim Hunter give you this award, And it's like, it's pretty cool. Well, American Werewolf is probably the movie that I'm going to be remembered for more than anything else.
I meet people a lot who say, I became a makeup artist because of that movie. And they were so impressed with Rick's work.
It was just innovative. It was groundbreaking. And it's a benchmark since then of movies to attain to. And very few can equal it, let alone better it.
It's not a stylized film. It's not made to be an 80s film. It's a film with reference to the past, drawing on Landis's knowledge of other films.
Lon Chaney Jr., Universal Studios maintain that's the mark of the wolf man.
It's just a very good story, very well told.
Werewolf is an artist's vision, from start to finish, And, mind you, it's an insane, crazy, hyperactive guy, but it's his vision, and that's what made it an American Werewolf, and that's why I think it's unique, and I think that's why it still holds up.
Like a lot of my movies, it I don't know why, but it's crapped on, and then years later, it's like a classic. So I don't know. I'm happy people like it.
After 25 years, the extraordinary legacy of an American Werewolf in London lives on. Thanks to John Landis, the horror genre is a little bit funnier, it's a little bit gorier, and Hollywood is forever trying to outdo Rick Baker in the special effects department, but to no avail. Fans worldwide still implore that naked American men are stealing their balloons, and that talking to a corpse actually is boring. So whether you're traipsing across the northern English moors or walking through the streets of London, wherever you are tonight, beware the moon.
This is the Werewolf of Beverly Hills. Say hello. Say hello. Don't be scary.
Hey, John, he won't take no for an answer. No, I can't do Werewolf 3 right now. Thanks very much. Or 2.
The changeover had continued to change. And if you're going to make noise over here, right, we're going to send you away. It's like...
you're going to have to cut round this bit.
I can assure you I don't find this in the least bit amusing.
I was on my way home one night. It was in the winter time, and it was about midnight, and I found myself on Edgware Road tube station, and the station was absolutely empty, except for me. And as I was sitting there waiting for my train, a guy appeared in front of me, and I just looked up at him, and he said, "You made me miss." It's you, isn't it? It's you, isn't it? God, it was fucking off the relief. I nearly gave him the contents of my wallet just out of sheer relief.